Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. A is back talking about books. It has finally come. It is part 2 to my 3-part series on Manacled by SENLINYU. This is gonna be the longest part. This is basically half of the book. The majority of the book is going to be this part. If you have not seen part 1, I will give you a refresher. I will link the video down below. If you haven't seen it, go watch that video first. This is gonna be part 2. Manacled has 3 parts. Part 1 is present day, part 2 are the flashbacks, and then part 3 we get back to the present day. So this part 2 is gonna be the flashbacks. We are going to learn about everything leading up to the events of what happened in the first video that I did. And it will be explaining the plot. This one has a lot less trigger warnings, I'd say, than part 1, but there is a lot of war going on, a lot of self-deprecating thoughts. So if those things trigger you, please take some time to yourself and maybe skip out on this video. And then also one more thing before we get into the meat of this video, I do want to say, I guess it does correlate because this book talks a lot about war, talks a lot about resistance and things of that nature, a lot of people dying. This is all fiction. There are real world things going on right now in the Middle East, in Palestine. If you have the means to do whatever you can to educate yourself, to research about what's going on, when you get down to the meat of it, there is a lot of nuance, I guess people will say, but when it gets down to it, nothing can justify the actions of what is going on in Palestine right now and the genocide of an entire people. So if you have any way of helping, please donate to the links I also did put on my community page. You know, even donating to those things, I don't even know if it's gonna work because they're not even letting aid into Palestine. I know we read books for escapism, we laugh, we can love, we can cry, but these are real things that are going on, and I never really talk about it on this channel. It is really important to me, and it should be important to a lot of you. If you don't know a lot of information about what's happening, even just being informed, not looking at American media only as your source of information and looking at different varieties of sources can really help to educate yourself and to know everything that's going on. That's what I will say about that. I could go on an entire video about what is happening right now. It's horrible, it's tragic, it is history happening this second. I think it's important to be on the right side of history. That's what I will say on that. So let's get started on the video. Welcome to Manacled by SENLINYU Part 2, the flashbacks. A little refresher for Part 1. Where do we leave off? So the war between Harry Potter and Voldemort is over. Voldemort won. Harry and all of his friends are dead. That is what happens in Part 1. Ginny, Ron, all of them dead. Okay? Everyone except Hermione. Hermione was locked in a prison at Hogwarts for almost 2 years, gained a lot of trauma from it, doesn't even remember what happened in the last 2 years of the war. And when she's let out of Hogwarts, she doesn't remember a single thing except her being in the resistance and her being in this cell, this dark, claustrophobic cell for 2 years. 2 or 3 years, something like that. When she's released, she gets sold into S-word slavery to Malfoy, Draco Malfoy, for a breeding program, very similarly to The Handmaid's Tale. And Malfoy is actually now one of the most powerful wizards of the wizarding world in Britain. He's the person called the High Reeve. No one in the wizarding world knows exactly who the High Reeve is. He is just known as this powerful person with a mask always on. The High Reeve, aka Malfoy, is Voldemort's right-hand man. He is able to Avada Kedavra everybody, which is a crazy thing to do because first of all, you have to mean what you say when you are doing that. And secondly, it takes a lot of energy and power to be able to just Avada Kedavra everybody. And no wizard has been able to Avada Kedavra as many people as Draco Malfoy has been able to as the High Reeve. Over time, being Draco Malfoy's S-word slave, she gets R-worded many times. She gains Stockholm Syndrome, starts to have feelings for Malfoy, because the whole entire world is cruel and Hermione is very lonely. She starts to get Stockholm Syndrome, gets feelings for Malfoy, and then over time, Hermione becomes pregnant after being R-worded time and time again by Malfoy. All the while, they're trying to see what is hidden in Hermione's memories. What happened in those 2 years? What is blocked off in Hermione's memory? What is she hiding? Something has to do with the resistance, and she is hiding something. Voldemort wants to know so badly what that is. At the end of part 1, it all comes crashing back to her. All the many memories come crashing back to her because the pregnancy induced the magic in her body for the memories to come back. It all comes crashing back to her. And now we get to part 2. What the fuck happened? I think this is 3 years ago. 1 year she was in the cell, and then it was 2 years of being in the resistance. Something like that, okay? So this is the beginning of the flashbacks. Starts March 2002. This is 6 years after Dumbledore's death, and the war still wages on. Hermione is happy-go-lucky, and she is working in the hospital trying to heal a wizard. She watches dark magic torture a boy's body, and it made Hermione want to scream. Being a healer, which is what Hermione does now in the resistance, she feels helpless a lot, and she sees so many dead bodies everywhere. And being in the hospital ward, she realizes that they're losing this war. Mad-Eye Moody comes up to her, calls Hermione in for a meeting, and says an opportunity has come up, one that could turn the tide of the war. He goes on to tell her that there is a new spy that they could bring in from Voldemort's army that's willing to turn to the resistance. This spy is Malfoy. Conditionally, it's the Malfoy boy. He says he'll turn spy to avenge his mother with the assurance of a full pardon. And he hesitates. He wants you now and after the war. Hermione puts her whole being into being a healer. She's exhausted, but she cares so deeply and is so needed. She didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't pick fights, didn't have casual sex. She just worked harder and longer. She didn't have time to grieve or regret. There was always a new body being brought to her, and she had no time to second guess herself. She slept when she was too exhausted to dream. She can decide whether she wants to go after this opportunity to meet up with Malfoy, to meet up with Draco, if she's willing to accept the offer that Draco Malfoy has for her. So now we can see in the flashbacks, oh, Draco Malfoy and Hermione already knew each other, maybe? After a while, Hermione contemplates it. She feels conflicted because they do need Malfoy. They're losing the war. No one in the resistance is willing to accept that. They're all Gryffindors. They believe in bravery, they believe in goodness, and they think that good will always win. They don't understand reality. Harry, Ron, none of them believe that they're losing the war. It's the Gryffindor in them. And they're so hopeful, but because of that hope, they're unrealistic. The only one being realistic about anything is Hermione. He's our best chance of turning this war around. We need this. You see the orphans, but I see the bodies. We can't afford to waste any opportunities now. I'm not going to turn down something that can give the Order even a fraction of a better chance of winning. No single person matters more than the whole war. You would do anything to end this war. I would. Snape, who is also a spy for the Order, he's also really close to Hermione, says that it might be a mistake for Malfoy to ask for Hermione. It might be a mistake on Draco's part. Hermione blinked. Why? As mentioned to Moody, I observed Draco had a sort of fascination with you in school. Do not misunderstand. I am not claiming it to have been anything meaningful, much less serious. However, you were someone he noticed. You may be able to use that fact to your advantage. I don't believe he realizes that. Snape tells Hermione that she should do her best to hold Malfoy's interest and keep him loyal to the resistance, implying that Hermione should try to seduce him. She goes to finally have her first meeting with Draco Malfoy. Hermione hasn't seen him in 5 years, since the 5th year at Hogwarts, and Moody apparates her, basically like poofs her, to her meeting location. His face had lost all traces of boyishness. It was cruelly beautiful. His sharp, aristocratic features were set in a hard, unyielding expression. His gray eyes were like knives. His hair still that pale, white blonde combed carelessly aside. If the assassin's blade were made into a man, it would take the form of Draco Malfoy. This is the first time Hermione has seen Draco in so long. The deal is that she is Draco Malfoy's from now until after the war. Forever. Hermione at this point doesn't really understand his motives. Why her? Why Hermione? But she's desperate to win the war anyway and will do anything. And upon meeting Malfoy for the first time again in years, Malfoy still has that cold, cruel Slytherin way about him. Malfoy's all playing games right now, okay? This is the first time they've seen each other in a while. He tells her to kiss him and she does it without resistance. And he's shocked. He's just like, you really are just gonna do anything, huh? To get my needs or whatever. He's shocked that she just does everything so willingly. And he asked her to kiss him, and she does it willingly. He asked Hermione if she knows about occlumency. I don't know exactly how to say that word, but that's how I'm going to say it, occlumency. If you remember from part 1 really, really briefly, occlumency is the ability to block off parts of your memory with magic to hide information. So occlumency is a great way for wizards to hide information, but not every wizard can do this. Hermione can do it, apparently. Malfoy kind of gives her a little bit of advice on how to hide specific information. He says, put in a bit of effort, but eventually pretend to give way. Once they're in, give them false memories or distract them by faying towards something of less importance. You'll never keep the Dark Lord out of your mind, but if he thinks you're weak, he'll assume victory. You'll have to give up something valuable enough to seem legitimate. However, it's a way to keep things that matter most hidden. In this first meeting, Malfoy gives Hermione a black ring. He says it's a meeting ring that will burn briefly if they ever need to meet up, and he also has a matching one on his hand. They agreed to meet up every single Tuesday. Mornings, Hermione's gonna go foraging, and then later on, right after foraging, he's gonna go meet up with Malfoy on Tuesdays. The next time that they meet up at the shack, this is their meeting place. It's like this little shack in the middle of nowhere. Malfoy barges into the door and kisses Hermione right away. Just bam. And she's so all caught off guard that she forgets to put her mental walls up. Her mental walls that Malfoy was talking about in the first meeting. Malfoy is able to easily get through Hermione's mind. She remembers what Malfoy told her and that she has to give something up in her memory so that as to not draw suspicion. He pushes a random memory out. And they practice this all day. Just blocking memories, giving false memories, they're just practicing this all day. Still don't understand Malfoy's motives. They're just chilling, hanging out, and practicing occlumency. Hermione has a lot of questions about what Malfoy's motives are, and he says something about avenging his mom. That's what Moody said in the beginning, but she still doesn't understand it. The boy who got box of sweets and had a spot for him on a Quidditch team, who cried and whined over a scratched arm, was gone. Everything soft and indolent and pampered about him was carved away by the war. He hadn't bought his way through Voldemort's ranks with galleons. He'd paid in blood. She's questioning him and says, are you needing a confession for something, Granger? Should I tell you everything that I've done? He drew closer so that he towered over her and sneered down at her face. This, I don't know if I put in the quote in the first part, but it is a callback to the first part. These are the exact same words that Malfoy has said in the first part. There's a lot of instances of this throughout the book, of parallels and repeats, but recontextualized. And I love SENLINYU for this. I love SENLINYU for this. I love her. Because they're practicing this occlumency, come to realize that Malfoy also has the same ability that Hermione has. And not a lot of people have this sort of ability to just block things away, put it in some sort of filing cabinet inside of your head. Hermione, questioning his motives, says she couldn't place what he wanted. Severus had been right. Malfoy was already proving to be an excellent spy. All the information he'd given Moody had been high quality and useful, because every single time they meet up, he gives her a little scroll with some information about the Death Eaters. The Order had successfully raided a prison and gotten more than 50 people out. However, his motive remained a mystery. She couldn't understand what he could possibly get from spying. With his placement in Voldemort's army, he'd surely reap vast rewards with the Order's demise. If the Order won, even with a pardon, he'd undoubtedly become a pariah in the wizarding world for the rest of his life. Spies and traitors earned little respect, no matter how vital their contributions were. So she's like, what is he getting out of this? What is he getting that's so beneficial to him that he would risk all of this? We go on to more of the book, and other than being a healer, Hermione's weak. She hasn't been actively fighting in the war for 2 years. One day while foraging, and foraging is very dangerous, okay? There could be werewolves, vampires, trolls, all these crazy things out there in the middle of nowhere. While she's foraging for ingredients for her potions, she runs away from some werewolves, and Malfoy finds her. And he gets mad that she's weak. He's like, why are you so weak? And gets so mad at her and says that he'll train her to fight. So if you remember part 1, in the beginning of part 1, how she's doing this little routine of burpees and pull-ups and shit like that, it's because Malfoy trained her in these past parts. Over time, Malfoy still has a very cruel way of talking to Hermione, and she loves to provoke him and try to get a feeling out of him. And on page 284, Draco threatens Hermione. He gets so mad when she compares him to Voldemort, and I will read you this whole scene. Hermione, this entire time meeting with him, you don't understand. The entire time she's meeting with him, she's waiting for Malfoy to just be horribly cruel to her, R-word her, do all these horrible things to her, torture her, and he hasn't done it yet. And she just wants to provoke him because she just wants to get it over with. That's like her mentality. She's like, can you just fucking like do whatever horrible thing you're gonna do to me? Like, why are you holding back on it? And so she's provoking him. He says, you look so bitter. His expression was vicious with mockery. You think I just demand you fuck me rather than not? Disappointed? Only in your dreams, she says, shooting him a glare. Every night? It would be too real for you, doing it with someone you know. Someone you'd see again. It would mess with those clear lines. Testing me, Granger? His voice was low as a caress. She stared at him. I suppose I am, she said coolly, but her heart was beginning to pound at the realization of what she'd just done. He leaned down, his eyes hard, until his face was centimeters from her own. Strip. Hermione didn't waver, neither did he, so he stepped slowly closer until she shuffled back. He loomed over her. His eyes glittered. It's killing you, isn't it? Wondering. You expect me to do this to you right off. So waiting, trying to guess when I might get around to it, that bothers you more than the thought of actually having to fuck me. He sneered. Well, you have my attention. Strip. Hermione stared up at him, feeling her face grow hot even as the rest of her body became increasingly cold. You don't even want me. Why did you include me in your demands? What is the point? She asked. Her voice was angry and confused. He smirked. You're right, I don't want you. It shouldn't have hurt to hear him say it, but somehow it did, especially set with the vindictive mockery in his expression as he stared down at her. However, owning you is never going to get old. Now and after the war. I can't wait to see how bitterly I can make you regret those words. So strip. His voice dropped low. Or did you want me to do it for you? Hermione's hands went up to the collar of her shirt and she gripped it defensively. She was terrified and enraged to the point that she thought she might start crying. He did own her. She'd agreed to it. Her jaw trembled and her hands started shaking. Power gets you off, doesn't it? Her voice shook with rage as she forced herself to unfasten the top button of her shirt. Hurting someone who can't or won't fight back. Using what people care about to torture and cage them and force them to do things, you are just the same as Voldemort. The malice in Malfoy's expression abruptly vanished and he paled. The check on his rage suddenly disappeared and darkness and magic poured off of him in waves, filling and writhing through the air. Get out, he snapped. She stared at him unmoving, like an animal petrified from war. He snarled with rage. Suddenly the door to the shack slammed open so violently the hinges snapped and it plummeted to the floor. Get out, he roared. So yeah, that's a little scene right there. The next time that they meet on Tuesday, she apologizes profusely because she's scared that Malfoy will betray the order. He says, it's fine. When I said I wanted you willingly, that meant you were allowed to say no. Although perhaps trying to say it instead of purposely provoking me. Hermione stared at him in shock. He clenched his hands into fists and pressed it against his forehead as though he had a headache. You want to continue with occlumency? Apparently she could have said no, whatever. As time moves on, Ginny and Hermione, who are really, really close, confide in one another. Ginny tells Hermione that she needs contraception and would like Hermione's help to create a potion. And Ginny says that Hermione seems really lonely and that she is the most close to Snape out of everybody, and asks Hermione if Snape and Hermione are together. Hermione's like, whoa, back the fuck up. Over time in their meetings, Malfoy teaches Hermione how to defend herself and away from hexes, to cast spells like a fighter, because one day she might need it. She might be on the field and she's weak as fuck. She's been out of combat for so long. She's only been a healer for so long that he makes her a fitness regime so that she can also protect herself from werewolves or vampires while she goes foraging in the woods and gets ingredients for her potions. Yeah, they just learn occlumency, they learn defenses and hexing and all of that. After a raid by the resistance against Voldemort, Hermione was working over time. There is no better healer than Hermione in the Order. She is so needed, although her work goes unnoticed because she is quote unquote safe in the hospitals. She goes to meet up with Draco and he looks horrible. Like he got no sleep, and all Hermione has seen for days after this attack is just loads and loads of dying and injured people, and also dead people. When Hermione and Malfoy meet up the next Tuesday after the attacks, it's told that Voldemort was really angry about it and blamed Draco for the attack because it was based off information that Draco gave to the Resistance. Voldemort crucioed Malfoy's back heavily. Hermione asks for Draco to take off his shirt so that she can examine it. And when she takes off his shirt, she is shocked. There was dark magic everywhere, and he looked like he was in so much pain. There was poison in his veins. There were runes on his back, like cursed runes. There were black tendrils beneath his skin from the mixture of the venom and the dark magic. She could see the poison in his veins halfway down his back, up and over his shoulders, around his ribs like a poisonous vine, crawling into him and sinking into the core of his magic. The marks that were there seemed so cruel, and they were cursed marks. There were runes on his back. There was just so much poison and blood and cursing. It looked like he was about to die, and it looked impossible to heal. Hermione felt so guilty, and she felt like she was responsible because Draco gave that information to Hermione to give to the Order. And he was punished for an attack that he gave them information to. Of course he would become punished by it. And he knew he would be punished for it. And it looked so horrible. The runes on his back, Hermione knew were eventually going to kill him. So later on, while she stupefies him so that it doesn't hurt, Hermione is working to heal him and is trying so desperately to heal him. She takes this necklace off of herself and uses the amulet that was around her neck to heal him more. Every night, they make a deal. Every single night, instead of just only Tuesdays, they would meet up so that Hermione could heal him. Kept healing Draco night after night. The venom combined with the runic magic made the injury one of the cruelest she has ever encountered. No matter what she did, it stayed fresh. He should have been in the hospital or at bed rest, not operating and spying and whatever it was that Voldemort had him doing. All while this is happening, over time, Draco also teaches Hermione dueling. One night, Hermione gets in her feels and gets drunk because she's lonely. Like, she has nobody. Her, Harry, and Ron, they have grown so distant apart. It's like they aren't even really friends anymore. She doesn't feel like she has anybody. The closest person that she has is freaking Draco Malfoy. And Draco doesn't even like her. And one night she gets in her feels, gets drunk, goes to the creek. And when she goes to the creek, Draco's there. And she just talks about how lonely she is. "I hate you," she finally said. "The feeling is decidedly mutual," he says, looking at her with an expression of disdain. She drops into a heap on the floor. "I hate you so much. I was already all alone, and then you demanded me, and it made it even worse. At least before, if anyone cared enough to ask me if I was alright, I could tell the truth. But now, I can't even do that. And now, even if we win, I won't have anything to look forward to. Everybody else will be free, and I'll still be owned by you. I'm just going to be alone forever." She buried her face in her hands and cried afresh. "Harry and Ron are never going to forgive me," she says, and her whole body shook with the force of her sobs. "Even if this wins the war, they'll never forgive me." Her life is basically over. She gave herself to Draco so that they could win this war. Harry and Ron have such a strong belief system that they don't need spying, that goodness will win, that she knows by doing this, by talking to Draco, by talking to somebody in the other side, they will not forgive her, and she just feels so alone. "I don't think there's anything particularly awful about dying. I know it's war. People die. What I care about is the manner. You have no idea, Malfoy, what it's like to have someone die while you are doing everything in your power to save them. He died slowly, screaming the whole time, and I was trying to save him. That's what haunts me. All those deaths in my mind. That's the type they are. That's why they haunt me. They were in my hands. I was trying to save them, and I failed." So Hermione sees this every single day. The manner in which Death Eaters are torturing and killing and injuring wizards, Hermione sees it every day and sees how torturous and painful it is and feels so helpless. And I think that working in the healthcare industry, this book has a lot of good information on what it must be like to be a healthcare worker. It is grueling work and there's no recognition for it. And it's so important. There is one person that Malfoy killed, and Hermione comes to this realization about it. Hermione felt ready to fall over at the dual realization that struck her. Malfoy had been trying to spare Colin, spare someone who was injured in the war. But possibly of greater significance for Hermione, Malfoy didn't regard that detail as redeeming. He'd been certain she'd become completely mindless with hatred for him once she knew he'd been involved at all. The unintended admission that he'd been trying to let the boy escape wasn't a way of trying to excuse himself. She suspected he didn't even register it as such. So this is Malfoy feeling like he's unredeemable and he's a villain through and through. And even though there are small moments where Draco does things like this, like killing someone in hopes that it will save them for the torture that they are going to endure, he doesn't see this as a redeeming quality. Hermione sees this as something that there's an inkling of good in Malfoy. She could use that to her advantage, and she could actually sway him to be loyal to Hermione and be loyal to the Order. Draco thought of himself as a villain, and she still doesn't understand his motives for working with the Order. She says this on page 474. As evening drew on, she got ready to tend his back. She took a moment of pause and steadied herself. She had to start over again. There was something between them that she had difficulty letting herself think about too carefully. A tension between them that she'd likely wreck with her outburst. She'd have to begin cultivating it again carefully. She had to be subtle as poison. Hermione has a meeting with the Order after a while, and it just shows how much Ron, Hermione, and Harry have drifted apart. She mentions Horcruxes and how she found out about Horcruxes while Ginny was injured. Mind you, this injury that Ginny got was a huge scar on her face, and it was gruesome, and it's gonna scar her for life. And she said, hey, I found out about Horcruxes because of Ginny's injury. The Sword of Gryffindor would destroy a Horcrux. Harry gets mad at her because it seemed like Hermione wasn't being empathetic that Ginny was hurting and was probably scared. Hermione says, either this all happens for a reason or it doesn't. She says with a cold rage, you can't have it both ways. If this is all supposed to be meaningful, then you can't get offended when I point it out and accuse me of being callous. Harry paled and dragged a frustrated hand through his hair. He stared at her with his eyes flashing for a moment before turning away. His lips curled slightly. The way you treat people, sometimes I feel like I don't even know you anymore. Let me fucking tell you how freaking annoying Harry is in this book. This entire book. I fucking hate him. He's so useless. I'm sorry. Just because he has a little fucking scar on his face and he's the boy who lived, like, he's so useless. Is he even the most powerful wizard ever? No. Why is he the main character of Harry Potter? Let me just tell you, this isn't the only annoying thing that he does in this whole book, but that's one of them. Find out about Horcruxes. They find out that there are objects that Voldemort's soul is inside of. So after this little debacle with Harry and seeing how much it drifted apart, and that is just one inkling and shows one inkling of that, over time, through the meetings, Draco and Hermione get a little bit closer and spend more time with each other. Hermione says, he's lonely and angry about something. I think he wants to be better than he is. You were right that there's something about me that draws him in. He tries not to, but he can't seem to help giving in when he has a chance to. Severus studied her, and Hermione wondered what her expression betrayed. Don't interpret that as loyalty, he said after a moment. I don't. I said to hold his interest. You are trying to make him depend on you. The difference is profound. In some respects, the Malfoys are closer to being dragons than they are to wizards. They do not share. They are obsessive about what they regard to be theirs. Do you know who Lucius needed? Narcissa. If you succeed in what you are attempting, he will never let you go, and he will not be content with being secondary to anyone or anything in your regard. Every single day, Hermione has been healing his back, healing the wounds on his back, did that little thing with the amulet to help Draco. Hermione says, okay, we just need to do this last bit. It's gonna fucking hurt. It's gonna hurt a lot. And she tells him that maybe what could help is just drink some alcohol, numb the pain. And he's drunk, okay? I love a fucking good drunk. I love a drunk scene, okay? I love a drunk scene. After healing him, Draco's drunk and he's like, oh, hey, we should drink together. You should feel privileged. I hardly drink with anyone. I never get drunk around anyone. It's such a terrible idea. Diplomacy is shoddy. Slowed reflexes, terrible idea. You said that, Hermione pointed out, sliding her hand behind her head, trying to find the doorknob. Did I? He blinked. See, somehow when it comes to you. He sighed and rested his forehead on the top of her head. Hermione stood frozen in astonishment. His empty hand came up and he grazed her cheek slightly with his fingertips, gliding his thumb along her cheekbone. Hermione's breath caught in her throat. You inspire bad decisions. Something about you. I can't understand it. He lifted his head and leaned back just enough to stare at her. What makes you so special? Draco Malfoy was handing himself to her on a drunk platter. If she had ever hoped for an in, this was it. The opportunity would never repeat itself, even if he was admitting he was making a mistake. That it was a risk. So after this, Draco's like, hey, we should drink together. And Hermione's like, fine. And then so they start drinking with each other. He says, I must admit, if anyone had told me that you'd become so lovely, I would have never come near you. I was rather blindsided when I first saw you. You're like a rose in a graveyard, he said, and his lips curved into a bitter smile. I wonder what you could have turned into without the war. She'd never seen him so expressive before. Everything had felt like a mask until then, with just the briefest flickers of something real coming through on occasion. As they sat there, she almost thought she might be seeing the real him, and he looked sad, lonely, maybe even heartbroken. And she's like an emotional drunk, okay? They get so close to each other. Finally, she lets her hair down. It's always up in this bun, and she has hair, you know? She got big hair. They just get very intimate. If you don't want me to kiss you, you should say so now. She felt the breath from every word against her lip. Everything felt surreal, like a dream, blurred and full of sensations. She could feel the weight of her life bearing down on her, crushing her until she could barely breathe from it. Until she could barely breathe from the loneliness. But she could also feel Draco's hand in her hair. He was gentler than she had thought he could be, warm to touch, beautiful. So close she could feel him breathing. He was looking at her like he saw her. He was asking if she hadn't spoken to Harry that evening, if she hadn't been so drunk, if she weren't so lonely, if the evening's revelation hadn't been that Draco Malfoy was actually nice when drunk, she might have done something different. But she didn't. She kissed him. A real kiss. The taste of fire whiskey was on each of their lips. Then after a while, they're kissing. It gets really intimate. It gets pretty far. Their chests were pressed against each other, and she wasn't sure if she was feeling her heartbeat or his. Perhaps they had the same tempo. She was so tired of being alone. She was so tired of being reduced to her functions: healer, dark arts researcher, potion mistress, liaison, tool, whore, as though she'd become any of those things because she had wanted to. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't. She just kissed Draco more fiercely, and he met with equal fire. He pulls away and tells her to go home because she starts crying. Scrawny. That was what he had called her after seeing her naked. That he'd wished he'd asked for someone else. She shook. Another unwanted thought came to her. She could be anyone. He was just lonely. He'd wanted anyone who touched him. A lump welled up in her throat, and she couldn't swallow it. Her hands stilled, and she fought to breathe without crying. Draco noticed. He raised his head from her shoulders and stared at her expression. Then he smiled bitterly, pulled his hand away, strained her clothes as he shifted her off his lap. You should go now, he said. And she's crying more. He thinks that she just wanted to kiss her because she was lonely. She thinks the same thing of him, that each person could have been anybody else. But then she says this, because you treat me like I'm me. My friends treat me like a colleague. Harry and I got into a fight, and then he apologized for insulting me professionally. Like, that was the part that hurt me. Somehow you make me remember that underneath everything I've become in this war, the person I was before still exists. She hadn't even been thinking about her mission. He touched her hair and told her she was lovely. He had seemed sad for her, and it had made her want to kiss him. If the alcohol hadn't made her insecure, she probably would have had sex with him. If she hadn't known that being touched by someone could feel meaningful like that hearing him groan and react to her touch would affect something deeply inside her. It had felt sacred. It hadn't been something strategic or impersonal. It had been her reaching out and kissing someone who was interested in her, who had felt kindred in her loneliness, someone who understood the dark world she had descended into, who wasn't angry at her for wanting to win the war at any cost. Okay, all right, I had to pause this video halfway through because I had to go to work, but we're in this. We're getting it going, all right? We're still in this, okay? Part 2, let's get through it. As time goes on, Hermione is at the hospital again. She does her rounds. She is helping patch people up at the hospital. And also, the resistance is not the end-all be-all of good, okay? What Harry is blind to is that in reality, Mad-Eye Moody, Snape, Kingsley, they're interrogating people behind the scenes. And this interrogation of Death Eaters they're doing is not considered good. They're basically torturing people. And Hermione is there to help patch these people up, to patch these Death Eaters up who are being tortured. One of those people is Montague from part 1. Now we understand what Montague was talking about in the first part, where he looked like he knew who Hermione was and was familiar with Hermione. He is being tortured by the Resistance to try to get information. And he says, "I'm not a werewolf, but I'm gonna remember you. When you lose this war, I'm gonna remember you. I'm gonna kill that blonde bitch, but I think I'll ask the Dark Lord if I can have you. He might want to keep you alive. I'll keep you alive." "That's enough, Montague," Kingsley said, sharp, standing up and walking over. I think the big characters that we have to keep in mind that are around Hermione in her life are Snape, Mad-Eye Moody, and Kingsley. Those are the people that know about Draco. The only people, because she's kind of distanced herself away from Ron, from Harry, from Ginny. Those are the only people that she's really close to and that really knows about what's going on and sees the behind the scenes of how to fucking win this war. As time goes on, for the next few meetings with Draco, he didn't show up. The last time that they were together, it kind of made things a little awkward. They were making out, she was crying, you know, and she didn't really know where that left their relationship. It saddened her because, against her better judgment, she was catching feelings for him. Real feelings. The reason why is that Draco saw Hermione for who she truly was, for all that she was. And with Ron and Harry, it was like that they cared more about righteousness than they did about her. It's giving Dane from Fourth Wing. You know, like Dane cared so much about the rules in Fourth Wing. Harry and Ron are giving the same energy. They cared more about righteousness than they did for her, and Draco probably didn't show up because he was scared of the intimacy and catching feelings for Hermione, and he wanted to avoid it. And the only way that he could avoid it was by avoiding her and not going to the meetings. So she does what she does. She starts foraging, looking for ingredients for her potions, and while she does, a werewolf attacks her because it's very dangerous and bites her leg. Draco appears to the cottage and sees all the blood. Draco knows when she's hurt, and also he does have that ring that will burn when she calls on him. I was foraging in Hampshire. The forest went quiet, so I cast detection spells, but nothing showed up. I decided to leave anyway, though. I was almost out when I got bitten by a Gytrish. When I was driving it off, a vampire attacked me. I killed it and apparated. I don't know why I came to Whitecroft. I didn't mean to, but I lost too much blood to apparate again, and I used up all my essence of Diemmi, and without Diemmi leaves, I can't make blood replenishing potion either, so I had to come here to fix it manually. It wasn't like Hermione had called on him, but he came anyway. And she says, "I'm not dying. The order is not in crisis, so you can just go. I'll clean up before I leave. You won't even know I'm here." Mind you, she's bleeding out, okay? She needs help. It was not the strategic thing to say, but she didn't want to look at him. He'd kissed her and then called her a bitch. He'd let her spend weeks healing him, only to thank her when he was drunk, and then told her he intended to go to a different healer the minute he was sober again. He'd cut her off. He'd made her miss him like an idiot, while he'd probably gone and fucked as many high-breasted, curvaceous prostitutes as his heart desired. She hated him, and she didn't even want him to see her when she was covered in blood and hysterical and traumatized. After that, Draco helps heal her, and then the next week, he finally comes back, as if nothing had happened, as if the kiss hadn't happened, as if healing her hadn't happened, as if he didn't ignore Hermione for weeks. He says that they should resume the dueling training. After the ordeal with the werewolf, Hermione also realized how much she didn't want to die, because I think foraging and getting that werewolf bite and losing so much blood, she never really valued her life, and that was the first time it was put into perspective, like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. The runes on Draco's back make it harder for him to control his impulses because they all stand for something, the runes. And she comes to the realization that it's hard for Draco to manage his impulses, and it's the runes' fault. He doesn't have as much control. He's gonna snap one day. It's clear that Malfoy has feelings for Hermione. He's just trying to hold back on them. For some reason, he'd become cornered by the realization that she would likely die if he didn't train her. The vampire attack had been remarkably good luck. If she tried to stage it, it couldn't have come out better. If she kept him near her, it was only a matter of time before he'd finally slip. He'd want her too much to keep holding back. When that happened, she'd own him, unless he was so desperate to free himself of his obsession that he killed her. In some moments, when she felt his eyes on her as they were dueling, it felt like a coin toss between the two, as though he were constantly weighing the options. In a way, Draco feels a lot of temptation for Hermione, but doesn't want to act on that temptation. Hermione goes back to give updates to Moody and Kingsley, who are in cahoots with her, tell them all she knows about Draco. He wants me. He's obsessive and he wants me, but he knows what I'm doing. I can tell by the way he looks at me that he knows. I still don't know what his long-term goals are. He doesn't ever say anything that gives it away. If I keep drawing him in and it turns out I interfere with his original ambition, he may resort to killing me. But if he doesn't kill me, according to Severus, the Malfoys tend towards being both obsessive and possessive. I don't think he'll abandon the order at that point. Willingness seems critical, and he knows that mine is conditional on the order's survival. I'm not being insincere. The emotional connection between us is real. Kingsley's fingers stilled, and he studied her with the slightly narrowed eyes. I hope you're not becoming compromised by him, Granger. The order is depending on you to stay on mission. The next time that Draco and Hermione meet, he wants them to practice doing the waltz because she's horrible on her feet, and doing the waltz could really help with that. Draco mentions Sussex in one of their sessions, and apparently in Sussex, the Death Eaters are expanding curse development over there. The scientists can do anything that they want with their test subjects, apparently, and that includes being tortured. Hermione, over time, is getting really scared that every single time Draco leaves, and they leave their sessions from every Tuesday, that one day she's gonna come to the cottage and come to the shack and he won't be there. And it's gonna be because he's dead. Don't die, Draco. He stared at her for a long moment before smiling. Only because you asked, Granger. Christmas time comes around. I think they met up in like March. Now it's Christmas. During Christmas time, during their meetings, Hermione gifts Draco a bunch of healing potions because, you know, he hates to properly get healed by himself. Draco got Hermione daggers dipped in manticore venom, which is a very special type of venom, and you can only get it from a manticore who died. And Draco had a manticore, and apparently it died. And it is a very, very powerful venom. So he gives her these daggers, and Hermione also talks with her colleagues when she's back at the hospital. This is later on. Hermione believes that the dark arts is the only way to win the war, and she's adamant about this, and they desperately need to win, and they have to do it by any means necessary. Angelina and Padma, who are some of the nurses at the hospital, disagree with her because they are winning. That's what Padma and Angelina think. Well, that's not true. We don't need to use the dark arts because we're already winning, even though they are only winning because of the work that Hermione is doing behind the scenes, the work that they don't even know about. So it's very, very conflicting things that are happening because they don't understand all that Hermione is doing for them, and that the things that she's doing are not quote unquote morally good, and that she sold herself so that they could win this war. Ignorance is bliss type of thing for the resistance. And it's so annoying because Hermione's doing so much for them. And I just want to scream for her. For real. She hadn't realized, it hadn't even occurred to her how the shift in the war would come across to the resistance. Of course to them nothing had changed. They all thought that by sticking to their own convictions about good and evil, that the war had simply shifted out of inherent inevitability. They had no idea that Death Eaters were being tortured for information, or that Hermione had sold herself to Draco in order to earn most of it. At this point in the book, she spends Christmas with the Weasleys. Everything seems happy. This is a small bit of bliss and happiness out of this whole sad story and war. Although everything seems happy, there's still a hole in Hermione's heart because they thought that they were winning the war. And it's only because of her that they're winning, from the information that Draco was giving her. And now the resistance is gonna just keep doing the same old things that weren't working before just because they think they're winning. It's also a bittersweet time in Hermione's life because this is around the time that Hermione had obliviated her family's 6 years ago, and now it's too late to reverse it. The timeline was she had to obliviate them from 5 years. Now her parents will never remember her, and so that makes Hermione even more alone. That's so sad. She's all alone in the world. And she talks to Harry about this. I've come to terms with the fact that protecting people may mean losing them. Well, not me. You'll always be my family. Whatever, Harry, whatever. So Harry and Hermione talk about how they haven't really been friends in years. Hermione wants to use the killing curse in the war. Harry is so against it because he's not a realist. She says this, she ate with this, okay? She ate with this. She said something inside Hermione snapped. You're not light if you let people sacrifice themselves in order to keep your hands and soul clean. She honestly ate with that because he doesn't understand the sacrifices that she is making. Even though he's not asking for them to do that, he's not doing anything to help the betterment of the war. We get more realizations. Hiding the secret of meeting with Draco has taken a toll on Hermione. She's angry. She's lying to her friends. They don't see eye to eye. They don't understand that she's already gone. She already sacrificed her life for the war. She's given her life to Draco, and she's pushing everybody away. We get more info on Draco's motives. It seems that he wants to figure out a way to remove his dark mark. The dark mark is the thing that connects him to Voldemort, the thing that helps Voldemort control him, and it's also that thing that gives Voldy control over all of his followers. Draco was apparently torturing this kid named Gibbon. I believe I know why he killed Gibbon. He concealed it and made the process look like torture, but once I noticed the enhancement, there were several clues that made what he had been attempting obvious. Draco is trying to find a means of removing his dark mark without dying from it. If the mark was possibly flensed or removed by chopping off the arm, Igor Karkaroff would be alive today. The mark is a connection between the Dark Lord and his servants. Severing it results in a cursed wound. The person bleeds to death unstoppably. There are no spells or potions to prevent it. Yet it seemed Draco is determined to find a way if he possibly can. This is also a reason why they said it at the beginning of the book, but Hermione noticed that Draco is ambidextrous, and she says that she thinks he was making himself ambidextrous so that if he needs to cut off his arm to get rid of his connection to Voldemort, he can use his other hand. Moody, Kingsley, and Snape thought that Draco would be killed in June. June is the time that Voldemort put all of those runes on his back, and Hermione used that little stone to heal him and did that intensive healing on his back. He was supposed to die. He was not supposed to survive that. It looked like he wasn't going to survive it until Hermione healed him. But because Hermione healed him so extensively, Moody, Snape, and Kingsley are so surprised that he's alive, and Hermione just finds out that he was supposed to die in June. Snape is kind of over it. He says they've been doing this little game with Draco for months. Snape also questions to Hermione, like, why is he still alive? What did you do to him? How did you heal him so that he's still alive? He should have died from those runes. When I was studying in Egypt, before I left to the hospital, Head gave me the heart of Isis. He thought I might need it for Harry. There was a deafening silence as Severus froze mid-motion over his cauldron. You didn't, he said, his voice nearly vibrating with disbelief. Do you know the value? If you'd sold it, you could have fed the resistance for a decade. The closest things to a philosopher's stone, and you used it on Draco Malfoy? It becomes apparent that this stone that Hermione used to heal Malfoy is very powerful, very strong, and very rare. And she used it on Draco Malfoy. Snape is furious, gives Hermione 1 more month for Malfoy to prove his loyalty to Hermione, because they do not have that proof, or else they are going to turn Draco in. And basically turning him in as in telling Voldemort, hey Voldy, you know Draco Malfoy, that guy you think is on your side, he's actually been giving us information for months. She is so scared. She's gotten feelings for Malfoy. She's gotten feelings for him, and she doesn't want him to be turned in. She feels helpless. She apparates right away to see Draco, and she doesn't feel like she has enough time to save him. Only 1 month to prove her loyalty. So January comes. It's about to be the time, and she tries so hard to push Draco out of his closed off shell. They practice dueling throughout the weeks, but he's still shut off. They're dueling one day, and then they both topple onto the floor. The tension is so palpable, and she kisses him. They're like on top of each other. Hermione's hands shot out. She grabbed hold of his shirt, dragged him back, and pressed her lips against his. It was not a slow, sweet kiss. It was not a kiss caused by alcohol or insecurity. It was born from rage, despair, and desire so hot it threatened to burn her into oblivion. It was possibly a goodbye kiss. The tension, the waiting, months of expecting him to move on her after being told it was why she was sent a maiden tribute for his services. But it had been a ruse on his part. Touching her, kissing her, wanting her, a feign to conceal his true intentions and motives. Demanding her had been the same form of misdirection that he taught her to use in diplomacy. A lie. Until it wasn't. Draco, who worried about her more than anyone else did, who had devoted time he couldn't possibly have trying to train her and keep her alive, because he wanted her to be alive. Since he told her she could say no, he'd never actually asked for anything from her, and he looked down at her. His expression was closed off, but his eyes were intent, as though he were memorizing her. Then his expression flickered, a flash of familiar bitterness, and she knew. He was waiting for her to betray him. He knew that she would. She would always choose the order first. That was the thing that had held him back. He had anticipated it since the very beginning, before the possibility had occurred to her, and he trained her anyway. And then they have sex. He pushed her legs apart and sank into her with a single hard thrust. Then he paused and kissed her before he started to move. Hermione bit back a cry and forced herself not to stiffen or pull away. It hurt. She was glad it hurt. She was whoring herself for the war. She had seduced Draco after he'd made it abundantly clear it was a line he didn't want to cross. She manipulated him because she wanted something from him. It should hurt her physically to do it the same way it hurted her mentally. In doing so, in having sex with him, she successfully got him to show his loyalty to her. It's a metaphor for finally not having so much control and losing control. And thus, in having sex with him, she saved his life. There was something ironic about seducing someone in hope it might somehow save their life. Her mouth quirked faintly at the corner. Then we get the big reveal. Finally getting Draco Malfoy's motives. Why is he working with the Order? It is his mom. His mom was tortured by Voldemort and kept in a cage. It ate away at her. And Lucius, Malfoy's dad, never knew that the Dark Lord was doing this to his beloved. The mom always wanted to keep it hidden from Lucius. And so Draco kept this hidden. He was the only one who knew how horrible Voldemort was to his mom. She was burned down in Lestrange Manor because of Voldemort, and now his dad blames the Order for that. It's also why Lucius is a Death Eater. I didn't turn because of that. I wanted to avenge my mother. I was perfectly willing to die in the process. Unfortunately, by the time I had an opportunity to offer my services, she had been dead too long. It wasn't a plausible explanation. I had to come up with something I'd ostensibly want from the Order. So, a pardon, but I knew that would hardly be believable either. I knew I'd need a contact. Choosing a girl and acting like I had some sort of interest seemed like a pragmatic solution, but a way to play into the Death Eater narrative. Then I remembered you. I thought for years that you'd die, but Snape reported you were the Order's healer. When you occurred to me, I thought I'd found the perfect solution. You were pragmatic enough that you'd go along if you thought you were saving your friend. When I said my terms were you and a pardon, they immediately bought it. I knew they'd send you with instructions to try to make me fall for you, to assure my services and ensure I wouldn't tire of you or change my mind. But I figured you'd been such a bitch back in school, and you'd hated me so much for killing Dumbledore, I was sure you wouldn't succeed. But you did. You outmaneuvered me. Or maybe I was just too tired and grieving and kept pushing you away. It hardly matters now, you won. Do you think it's a choice when the Dark Lord tells you to take his mark? You sold yourself to save the people you care about, well, so did I. Killing Dumbledore and climbing the ranks was the only way to get her out. After she died, I was being watched. The Dark Lord isn't a fool. He knew I'd waver after losing her. I had to re-earn his trust before I could risk doing anything. My father always said that we had to take care of her. He made me swear again and again, growing up, that I'd always take care of her. I was trying to take care of her. I was trying to keep her safe. I was trying to figure out a way to run, and then was burned to death in Lestrange Manor. I can't. He kept repeating the words as he shook. Hermione didn't know what to do. She'd stroke her fingers through his hair and along the back of his neck as he kept repeating the words over and over again. I can't do this again, he gasped. I can't care for someone again. I can't take it. He didn't even want to live. He wanted revenge. He wanted to die. Caring for her, for Hermione, was a disappointing twist for him. It wasn't enough to make him live. She just made it worse. That was all she'd done. She goes to Severus, tells Severus, he told me everything. It's his mom. He wants to avenge his mom. He has his loyalty. After having this heart-to-heart with Draco as well, Hermione and Draco both realize that they are people who have given their entire lives for the war, for revenge, and now they have nothing else. They have this one goal. Draco's is revenge, is to avenge his mom. Hermione's is to win this war. They have nothing else planned after that, and that is the thing that they share. She also expected to die. Draco and Hermione both expected to just die after completing this one task that has taken up their entire life. Draco makes an unbreakable vow to Moody, saying that he would aid the Order in defeating Voldemort to the best of his ability. We find out Ginny is pregnant. Yay! Preggers. Hermione makes a potion so that Ginny can hide the pregnancy as a sickness instead, because Ginny doesn't want to tell Harry yet. Harry is dealing with so much already. He's the face of the resistance. Putting a pregnancy on top of all of that is just so much to handle. Now it is March. March 2003. It's been 1 full year since the first meeting with Draco Malfoy. The Resistance does an attack on Hogwarts. After this attack on Hogwarts, Ron is captured. Harry is losing it. He is out of his mind. He wants to rescue Ron immediately. Hermione goes to Draco and asks him for everything on Hogwarts, because Hogwarts is a prison. It's taken over by Death Eaters. Anything that can help them get Ron out so that Harry doesn't do something impulsive and stupid, because Harry is impulsive and stupid. He talks about, oh my god, good will always win. Good. You're gonna kill other people just trying to get your best friend out. He's annoying this entire book. I'm just saying. Malfoy is shackled to Hermione. That's what he feels like, because he's so protective of Hermione now and basically loves her, but he hasn't said it. Loves her so deeply and cares so much for her. Because of that protection over her, they're like manacles. They're like shackled. In a way, the title of the book, Manacled, has double meanings, or many meanings. The first part is Hermione physically being in shackles, in manacles. It's also Draco having manacles because he cares so deeply for somebody else, and having people that you love is within itself a weakness. It's Hermione being shackled physically, Malfoy being shackled to Hermione, and both of them being shackled to the obligations of war and other people. All of the sacrifices that these two people had to make. After all, I did choose you. You were so determined to do whatever it took. You will always be a Gryffindor at heart. I envied the fact that you still had the space to be naive, to credit me with goodness, and failed to realize that Moody and Shacklebolt had been setting me up from the beginning. When you begged for a chance to heal me, I gave in. When you touched me, I didn't push you away. I thought, where's the harm? It all ends soon enough. Life has been cold for such a long time. Then after you nearly died in Hampshire, I thought, at least I can keep her alive. She deserves to have somebody who cares enough to try to keep her alive. I thought eventually you'd give up, but of course you will do anything to save the people you feel responsible for. Of course you'd weaponize your own guilt in order to use mine. He gave a low, bitter laugh. I'm sure there's something poetic in it all, but right now, all I feel is a new set of manacles. All this is happening, Ron is still captured, and they get new information. What are you planning? 5 of you can't possibly think you're gonna break into Hogwarts for a rescue. Ron's not at Hogwarts, Harry says matter-of-factly. The word is that they moved him closer to London for interrogation. There's a small prison near Cambridge. So he's in Cambridge. They don't have enough soldiers for this rescue mission. It's most likely a trap. It's most likely a setup. All the healers are on the field, and so Harry asks Hermione to come, even though she hasn't been in battle for 3.5 years. She tells Harry that before they go, she has to get her healing supplies, but she lied. Instead, she goes to the shack to see Draco, and he doesn't show up because he's busy, and so she writes him a note. The location, their strategy. Hermione knew that this rescue mission was probably a trap, and they are very limited in time. They do the whole rescue mission. They grab Ron. They leave the building. There are 100 Death Eaters upon them. It was in fact a trap. They block all the ways of escape, the Death Eaters. She has to fight her way through with everybody else, although she was also saved in the way that she had been practicing battle stuff with Draco for over a year. They were obviously outnumbered. She felt like she had no choice but to use a bit of black magic. Just one little curse ate away at her chest. Using dark magic takes a lot out of you. Throughout this battle, Hermione is super injured. Her lung was punctured. Her liver was nicked. A Death Eater, Reboston Lestrange, starts to stab her. And all of a sudden, he stills on the floor. He's on top of her. He stills on the floor, falls to the floor dead. She's like, how did this guy die right on top of me? A masked Death Eater was behind them. To Hermione, it was obviously Draco, but he had a mask on. He killed them all. All the Death Eaters that were there, the 100 plus Death Eaters, Draco kills them all. He was as deadly as she'd imagined. Through fluidity of movement, the wake of bodies he'd left behind as he stalked across the field. Draco's style was brutally efficient. He killed everybody. He showed no hesitation as he mowed through the panicked Death Eaters around him, most of them non-verbally. He conjures up a flock of a dozen silver hummingbirds, and they get at everybody's throat. He was within a few feet of Hermione, gets to Hermione, operates them away. Draco is furious at Harry for putting Hermione in danger after getting Hermione's note. Everyone always puts Hermione on the back burner, doesn't care for her safety, except for Draco. You knew it was a trap. You knew it. But you went anyway? Robuston's prison ambush. No one actually thought the Order would be idiotic enough to fall for it. It was a training simulation for rookies. Harry was gonna go. So, Harry is the point of this war. If he dies, it's over. I will always follow him. Strategically, I'm a casualty we can afford. Harry is not. If I improve his odds at all, it's worth it. You weren't saving Potter, you were saving Weasley. Ron is critical. Harry needs Ron. If something happened to Ron, it'll break him. He needs Ron to win the war. What about you? Doesn't Potter need you? You are not expendable. You don't get to push everybody away so they'll feel comfortable with using you and letting you die. You did this to me. You made me as expendable as I am. She choked back a sob. And you didn't even want me either. Draco caught her by her right arm. You are not replaceable. His hands were shaking as he gripped her. You are not required to make your death convenient. You are allowed to be important to people. The reason I took that fucking vow was to keep you alive, to keep you safe. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, they start having a back and forth. Harry hates that Hermione used dark magic when they were being surrounded. He says, it eats away at your soul. It hurts you. It turns you bad. It eats away at you. It's gonna get you killed. And then Hermione eats with this next line. She says, you are more than willing to risk my life. I don't see how my soul is somehow more important. She ate because she's so right and Harry's such a freaking hypocrite. He hates that she used dark magic, but then you didn't care about her safety, taking her into a fight that she hasn't been in the field for 3 years, and all of a sudden you care about her safety and using dark magic? Like, bitch, get the fuck out of here. But dark magic does eat at you. And later on, she feels the effects of the dark magic taking over her. She needs someone that can help her hold down, that can ground her to reality through the self-destructive tendencies and the hallucinations, because you can hallucinate. She couldn't find anybody because she's lonely, and so the only person she has is Malfoy. He shows up and poof, they poof away to a Muggle hotel. This entire time, Hermione thinks she's hallucinating. She's like, he's dressed in Muggle clothing, a sweatshirt that says Oxford on it, and she's never seen him in Muggle clothing before, and so she thinks she's hallucinating the whole time. She's so lonely, and she just wants to care for Draco. I want to love someone without feeling like if they know, it'll end up burning them. Harry was my first friend. I always wanted friends, but I was always too odd, too bookish, too awkward. I was always alone. No one wanted to be my friend. Harry was the first person who let me be his friend. I thought we would always be friends, but now I have to push him away to protect him, and Ron, and my parents, and now there's nobody. I have to love everybody from a distance, and I'm so lonely. You don't have to push me away to protect me. I can take it. You can stop being lonely. I won't misunderstand. I know you just want someone to be with. I won't take it as meaning anything more than that. She kept pulling away. I'm alone too, Granger. And so after that, they have sex again. But now it's because she feels so lonely and so tender and so gentle. And it's just both of them connecting and being together and not being lonely together. This whole time, she still thinks she's hallucinating. This entire time, she thinks she is hallucinating. And she literally had an orgasm. She thought she hallucinated that. She thought her first O with him was like a hallucination. And you know what? That shit gets me every fucking time. Because tell me why this book is so depressing as fuck. That shit cracks me up. Okay? It's very obvious that Draco is very possessive of her. He was like a dragon. The jealous way he hoarded the things he cared about, there was no moderation in it. He was possessive and deadly. He held her in his arms like she was his. The temptation to give into it, to let him have her and to love him for it terrified her. He needed to love people and the desperate desire for them to love her back. She had locked it away, acceded its place to the coldness of logic, realism, and strategic decisions for the sake of the war. She shoved it down into a hole where she wouldn't feel it, wouldn't miss it. Draco had dragged it up from the well where she'd hidden it, uncovered it, and set himself to picking the lock. She could almost feel his fingers turning the dial, listening to the drop of every tumbler, lying in wait for a way in. His own grief and loneliness, his attention and unwavering constant. And that way he looked at her, the way he touched her, it was slipping through her defenses and coiling around her heart as surely as she had wound around his. After they do it, Hermione thought she was hallucinating. They wake up the next morning and she's like, oh shit, that was real. Gets me fucked up every time. He says, you're mine. You swore yourself to me. Now and after the war. You promised it. I'm gonna take care of you. I'm not gonna let anyone hurt you. You don't have to be lonely because you're mine. The way that this relationship is so fucked up. Not necessarily healthy, but I'm kind of here for it. I'll talk about it later, okay? I will talk about it later. I'm just going through the motions of explaining the plot. But I guess we'll get to it in part 3. The contradiction of like how different this part, the flashbacks, are from part 1. How can you deal with the fact that this man literally R-worded you? If we're talking about part 1. But you have all of this history, and we don't know what happened to him in part 1 yet. In part 3, we'll explain it all. But it's crazy how you could read part 1 and hate this man, and then read the flashbacks, and you fall in love with this relationship. It just fucks with your head, you know? Still fucks with my head. Especially in war and in trauma, things can get so complicated and convoluted, crazy. And they talk about all these complications in this book. So I would recommend reading it. Explaining the plot is not the same as like going through the feeling and the writing and the reading it. So I do recommend reading it. This is the next morning. Hermione questions why they're in the Muggle world in a hotel. Draco says that's how he escapes reality. He doesn't like staying in the manor because it reminds him of his mom. That's where his mom died. He hops a bunch of different Muggle hotels so he doesn't raise any suspicion. There's more explanation about the Heart of Isis, the necklace that Hermione used to heal Draco. It's an Egyptian healing stone. That's what saved Draco when he was meant to die. The stone absorbs dark magic and purifies the poison of dark magic. And that's also why in present day he is such a powerful wizard. That's why he can just Avada Kedavra everybody, because he's basically immune to the effects of dark magic. Which is crazy. I never expected you, anyone like you. From the moment you walked into my safe house, I expected you to eventually be the one to sell me out. I expected you to know that, but instead you acted as though I were redeemable. You acted as if you were going to be owned by me for the rest of your life, and you were just determined to live with it to save your order. I didn't realize that they wouldn't tell you. They wouldn't tell him that he was supposed to die. We're a fucked up pair. I can't believe it ended up like this. I felt that you were only showing me a mask, someone you thought would be easy for me to hate. Maybe if I'd been less lonely, I would have believed it. But you reminded me of myself, thought we were the reverse of each other. Now, she looked over at him, extended her hand. I think we're mostly the same. We get a little more sense of how much Hermione has done for everybody, being a healer, and it's kind of commentary on how grueling the healthcare industry is and how it's faceless work, underappreciated. They don't even know who you are. You're a faceless figure in their plan. They love their nurses, the hospice healers, Pomfrey, Patil, the ones who hover once they're out of danger. They didn't even know that you're the one who saved them again and again. I will never be a hero. I knew that when I chose to train as a healer. That's never been the reason for any of my choices. I want the next Muggle-born witch with stars in her eyes to come into a world that welcomes her. A world where she doesn't have to constantly re-earn her right to be there and isn't treated like wanting to exist is stealing something from someone else. Where she'll get to grow up and graduate, get a job she wants, get married, have children, and grow old with someone. I won't get to have any of those things. I want to make the world I wanted to live in. Then Hermione goes back to the Order camp. It was found out that after getting Ron out, he was tagged with something. This is the first semblance of what would be the Manacles, and this is the thing that they're developing in Sussex. Only Kingsley, Moody, and Snape know everything that Hermione has given up for the Order, and everyone else thinks that she doesn't really do much, and it's so infuriating. It's so infuriating. They plan a mission to go to Sussex to find out more about the labs, about these new shackles, and about how to get it off Ron. It was a hard thing to do because if they figured out how to get it off of Ron, then the Death Eaters would just be able to make another pair and perfect it more, right? Like if they figure out how to get off Ron, okay, we need to find a way where they can't do that. Hermione, after finding out this information, meets up with Malfoy, They talk about what would happen after the war. If the Order somehow wins, I'm sure the Intentional Confederation will suddenly be eager to be involved, to preside over all the trials. A lot of my activity has been largely unsanctioned. Order is supposed to be democratic. When it all comes out, it won't paint a pretty picture. If I'm lucky, they'll just take my wand away for a few years. But in reality, she knows that she might go to jail. Draco offers Hermione to get her out of the wizarding world and out of the war, to get her to safety. They both know that in reality they're probably gonna die, but he makes her this promise. It's the only hope that he can really give her. He says, then we'll go together. After the war, when the war's over, we'll both run somewhere, no one knows us, we'll disappear when it's over. He was lying. They both were. They had no one else, and they felt like both of them were less alone with each other. He was like a dragon, and a dragon protects what was his with his whole chest. And she gave into it, and she liked it. And the more they met, more often than not, and they called on each other through the black ring that Draco gave her in the beginning of the meetings. Careful, don't die, you're mine, I'll always come for you. These are things that they say to each other over and over again. They basically love each other, they just haven't said it yet. I'm gonna take care of you. I swear, Hermione, I'm always gonna take care of you. We learned more about Draco's mom. Draco felt like he killed his mother, and avenging his mother was a way of penance for him, for not being able to save her. The day I killed Dumbledore, the Dark Lord demanded we have dinner with him. He said we were celebrating my success. She'd been released only a few hours, and he wanted her to play hostess. Her tremors were so severe, she could barely hold the silverware. Her fork kept rattling against the plate, and then she'd drop it and panic when she tried to pick it up. Apparently, the noise was distracting, so the Dark Lord took a steak knife and drove it through her left hand and into the table. Then he left her there, bleeding until he retired. I was seated across from her, and she just looked at me the whole time, shaking her head to warn me not to do anything. I couldn't do anything. I tried to shield her. I kept her in her rooms as much as possible. I brought in healers to help her recover. The mind healers couldn't do a damn thing. I should have had her treated sooner. That's what they all told me, that I should have gotten her treated sooner. He doesn't want the same torture that his mom went through to happen to Hermione. He just wants so badly to keep her safe, and he wants to protect her. Having this love, this devotion to someone so wholeheartedly is a detriment to Draco. Let me get you out, please, Hermione. I swear to God, it won't affect my aid in the Order. Let me get you out. I can't leave. I am loyal to the Order. I'm not gonna run while everybody else is fighting. Draco, you can't ask me to run away from the war. Hermione goes back to the hospital ward. There's ongoing battle. Kingsley brings people into the hospital, but right before he apparates away, Hermione, dumbass bitch, holds on to Kingsley. Hermione is also apparated with him into the middle of the war, in the middle of battle. She looks around her, it's getting tense. There's so many dead bodies around her. She sees a boy who's dead, probably torn apart by a hag or a werewolf. A Death Eater appears before her, and she gets hit by a curse from the Death Eater right before she's able to apparate back to the hospital. She has boils burning deep in her bones and her chest, and it hurts so much. It's so painful. And Padma, a girl from the hospital, doesn't know how to heal her, needs Hermione's help to heal her, but Hermione cannot speak. It hurts so bad. And that's the worst thing about being the best at something. When you need help, nobody can do it as good as you. Hermione can barely speak, let alone give directions to Padma, and it felt like she was dying. And it hurts so bad. And this little house elf creature sees that Hermione is injured and hurt. Padma can't really heal Hermione first, leaves her on the side while Padma goes to heal everybody else because there's a lot more sick people around them. Hermione's injury was very obviously beyond Padma's abilities, and she had to wait for Kingsley to come back, and it hurt so bad. Creature comes back, the little house elf, and things went black. She wakes up, she sees Draco. Where the fuck did I go? That's what Hermione's thinking. They are at Malfoy Manor. Draco tells Hermione that Kingsley is dead. Draco killed him. If Draco didn't get Hermione from the hospital and get Creature to get Hermione from the hospital, she would have been dead by now. All it took was a simple diagnostic spell to know that Hermione was dying from vampire venom. You would be dead if I hadn't. You were bitten by a vampire and took cough suppressing potion. Did you even know you were drowning in blood? You had minutes left when you arrived. 2 casualty healers were barely enough to save you. She had forgotten about the vampire bite. It had happened so quickly. Had Padma overlooked it? Had she not even cast a diagnostic charm advanced enough to detect it? Draco says this: I have warned you. If something happens to you, I will personally raise the entire order. This isn't a threat. It is a promise. Consider your survival as much a necessity to the survival of the resistance as Potters. If you die, I will kill every last one of them, given that the risk of their lives is apparently the only way to make you value your own. I'm blushing. Have someone threaten an entire resistance for me. I'm blushing. Just live, Hermione. That's all I'm asking you to do for me. Hermione gave a low sob. I can't promise that. You know I can't promise that. And I cannot risk what you would do if I die. He kissed her, his hands caressed her face, and his fingers tangled in her hair. She sobbed against his lip. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did this to you. Creature had been working for Malfoy and spying on the Order for around a year. And Hermione is recovering. She cannot physically move. She's like on the bed. She literally does not have bones in her body. She has to regrow her bones, okay? She's on bed rest while they grow back. She looks over at the scars on her chest from the healing, and they're gnarly. While the search for the Horcruxes is ongoing, Draco had to kill Kingsley because he was captured, and it would have been worse to be interrogated and tortured. So it was kind of a good thing that he did that for him. His time was up, and he was also really abusing the knowledge that Draco was giving them a little bit too heavily, because now Voldemort knows that there's spies among the Death Eaters. Once she is healed enough, she finally goes back to the hospital and confronts Padma. I had vampire venom in my system, Padma, and unfortunately, I wasn't in a state of mind to recall it. That's such an easy thing to fix if you just use a better diagnostic. If I hadn't been taken to be healed, I probably would have died in the middle of the foyer. Padma's face crumpled. I don't have any excuses. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back a corpse, Hermione said, her voice shaking as she tried to rein in how venomously enraged she felt. You know what? Good, because Hermione never speaks up for herself, and she fucking deserves to go off. Find out more about the Horcruxes. One of the Horcruxes is the Hufflepuff Cup. Draco and Hermione destroy the Hufflepuff Cup together. Yay, one Horcrux out of the way. The resistance really needs to get into Hogwarts, and Hermione suggests that they can make a bomb to get into Hogwarts. The war is like coming to a head. On their next meeting with Draco, he informs Hermione that he has to go to Britain with his dad, Lucius, on some Death Eater business, and he doesn't know how long until she's gonna see him again. The war was like an abyss, wanted everything and was never satisfied. There was always more required, another life, an additional measure of blood. Be better, smarter, more ruthless, more quicker, more cunning. Accept a second portion of pain. It was never enough. Hermione had gone to Ilios and Pansia. She'd lain herself prostrate at the feet of Athena. She'd built prayer towers. She'd sacrificed almost every piece of herself that she had to offer. Never enough. Draco had walked straight to the altar of Ares. Never enough. Nothing was ever enough. The war always wanted more. If you stare into the abyss stares back at you. What will you give? What will you give to win? They talk every day about how scared they are that the other is going to die. As the war keeps getting more tense, every day feels like their last, and it keeps feeling like every moment's their last. You're always in danger, and I can never ask you to stop. I would if I could. You know I'd run away with you and never look back. Don't die, Draco. You can't leave me behind. All that to say, if Harry manages to defeat you-know-who on Tuesday, you have to go. You have to run. I won't be able to go with you, but if we win, you should go anyway. I'm not gonna leave without you, Granger. You have to run. If you're caught, I might not be able to protect you. If he dies, as soon as he dies, you go. You'll finally be free. It will be your life, Draco. I'm never leaving you behind. Hermione checks on Ginny, who is still pregnant. She's now 6 months pregnant. She can feel the baby kicking, okay? The war is gonna come to a head. It's gonna end at Hogwarts, hopefully. Hermione promises Harry that she would take care of Ginny for him if he dies. And Harry feels this impending doom coming upon him. Hermione makes a bomb to bomb Hogwarts so that they can get in. After someone tells her some little inkling about Harry's injuries in the past, having 2 magical signatures, Hermione realizes immediately that Harry is a Horcrux and has part of Voldemort's soul inside of him. Also, Hermione has been using more dark magic in the meantime, and the more she uses it, the more it messes with her memory and her brain. She apparates straight to Hogwarts to tell Harry immediately the new information that she found out. They set up camp outside of Hogwarts, and he also tells her that they found another Horcrux. It was Ravenclaw's datum. She tells Harry that he is a Horcrux and that part of Tom's soul is inside of him. Harry is ready to die. He realized it, but Hermione needed to ground him and tells Harry that Ginny is 6 months pregnant. I'm not lying to you, Harry. I swear on my magic. She's almost 6 months pregnant. Ever since she learned the gender, she's called him James. Please, Harry, let's go find Alistair and have everyone pull back. She starts shaking. She could see him wavering. Please, Harry, promise me you'll take care of them for me. Promise me, Hermione. Promise me. I promise. The words felt as though they were torn out of her heart and dragged up her throat. They felt like blood from her lips. I'll always take care of them as long as I live. So this is the final promise to Harry before Harry thinks he's gonna die. The final showdown with Voldy happens, and Harry does die. He's alive. As the words were uttered, Harry suddenly moved, his wand whipping up. Voldemort was quicker and already poised to strike. Avada Kedavra. The curse struck Harry in his chest, and his green eyes went blank. Voldemort wasn't done. His face contorted with rage. Avada Kedavra. The curse struck Harry's body again. They were screaming now. The resistance screamed Harry's name over and over. Hermione gave a low sob, torn from deep in her chest, gripping the canvas of the tent in order to keep from dropping with despair onto the ground. After Harry dies, all hell breaks loose, and Hermione makes a run for it. She runs, and then again, she blacks out. She wakes up in Draco's bed again, and the resistance has lost. The war is over, Draco tells her. Now the priority is to find the remaining Horcruxes, because even though the war is over, resistance still moves on, and they can still kill Voldemort if they find the Horcruxes. Draco wants to get Hermione out, but Hermione will only leave on one condition: if Ginny can come with her. Ginny is maybe in one of the safe houses, and they find out that she was captured and sent to Sussex, where they're doing experiments. It's gonna be found out soon that Ginny's pregnant, and they have to get her out quick. Draco, I have to get Ginny back. I will never ask anything of you after this, but I have to get Ginny. I'll leave the war, she said, her voice desperate. I'll stop everything. If you get Ginny for me, I'll do anything you want. I swear I'll leave. I'll never come back. Whatever you want, anything you ask if you get Ginny to me. Will you? I will. He studied her, his eyes narrow and calculating. Those are your terms? The Weasley girl and you'll go? I swear it. Draco gets the girl, gets Ginny from Sussex, but in doing so, in getting her out of Sussex, he blew his cover. It's over for him. Blow my cover getting the Weasley girl out for you. You what? She looked into his eyes, certain she was misunderstanding him. It was in his eyes. He was saying goodbye to her. He was going to die. There wasn't any other way. His eyes were intent as he stared at her, as though he were memorizing her, because it was the last time he'd ever see her. There was also a sort of vicious triumph in them. The thing I wanted. If I went and got the Weasley girl for you, those were your terms. Her stomach had dropped until there was nothing but a chasm inside her. Her chest hurt, as though Draco had reached in and wrenched her heart out. We had a good run, Granger, but we were never gonna last. You knew that. Hermione becomes hysterical. You'll be alive and away from the war. Those were always my terms. Hermione says this. Okay, this is goodbye. I just need to tell Snape and update Snape about everything. You can get Ginny and take Ginny to the safe house first, and let me go talk to Snape and give Snape all of my research. Hermione gets all her research to give to Snape while Ginny and Draco leave. All this that Hermione is saying about Snape and getting them to leave, it was a lie. Hermione lied straight to Draco's face. Hermione has a new plan in her mind. She came up with it right off the bat. She knows how to make bombs. She bombed Hogwarts. She is gonna blow up the Sussex lab and hopefully, in doing so, kill everybody that was inside of there so that nobody knows that Draco was part of the resistance and that his cover isn't blown because everybody in Sussex dies. That is Hermione's plan. Blow up Sussex. That way, Draco's out of the way and safe, and so is Ginny. And everybody who saw Draco and saw that he was a traitor is dead. So she goes to Sussex with her bomb. Draco's out of the way, Ginny's out of the way. There are Dementors surrounding the area, and she uses a Patronus to fight them off. and she needs something super powerful. The Patronus that comes out isn't her otter, it was a dragon instead. This dragon was so powerful, it was fighting off the Dementors. Then someone captures her. Grand Montague, this motherfucker again. She got her wand knocked out of her, so she couldn't apparate. She doesn't know if her bomb blew up yet. She has her knives though, and so she stabs him in the shoulder. The daggers that Draco gave her, she stabs him in the shoulder, tries to get him again in the heart, but by the time that she could get there, stupefies her, rendering her unconscious. This all is happening so quickly. She tries to blow up the hospital, and when she wakes, she is at Hogwarts. She is in prison. She's in a cage. Wakes up, where the fuck am I? She can hear Molly Weasley to the sidelines screaming her husband's name, seeing her husband tortured and being torn apart in front of her eyes. George Weasley's head was on the sidelines. Hermione overhears the guards saying that Hermione's plan worked. She killed everybody in Sussex. The bomb worked. Her powerful magic, her Patronus, it worked. Umbridge comes in to greet Hermione. Umbridge, that sadistic motherfucker, wants to torture her. It turns out that she can't, because apparently some other guards say the Dark Lord wants her intact so that he can interrogate himself. After hearing that she's going to be interrogated, she gets scared because she has 2 years worth of memories in her brain of Draco, of all of their time together. And so she uses her occlumency that Voldemort wouldn't see. She starts putting, immediately after hearing this, she does her inner magic, does her work. She hides all of her memories of Draco Malfoy so that when she gets interrogated, hopefully Voldemort won't see it. After she successfully puts all those information away, they put manacles on her wrists and they suppressed her magic. And Umbridge took her, because she's a sadistic motherfucker, takes her far, far away inside of Hogwarts than anyone else, because she is she's Harry's girl. She's a special girl. She needs to be kept in a special place and intact for Voldemort, away from everybody else, secluded. And after hiding away everything, she realizes that by doing so and putting the shackles on her wrist, it suppresses her magic, so she can't bring up those memories back. Over and over again in her cell, she says, I have to hold on. Hermione, hold on. He always comes for me. She feels her ring burning. Draco might come for her before Voldemort called her in for interrogation. She had to be ready. He always comes for her. She couldn't let herself waste away. Hold on, Hermione, she mouthed the words over and over again. There wasn't any food. There wasn't any water either. She didn't know how much time passed. Her ring kept burning. Every time she'd give a small gasp of relief and start crying from the reassurance Draco was still alive somewhere. Then she'd catch herself sharply. She couldn't think about it. Let herself think about Draco. If Voldemort got to her first, she couldn't have him in her mind when she couldn't occlude him. She used the barest, smaller bits of magic and pushed her memory of him further out of reach, as though she were an oyster, carefully burying her memories under the tiny layer of occlumency she could wield without activating the magical suppression. Over time, she'd lose more and more of her memory. Someone will come for you. Someone always comes for you. No one came. Everybody was dead. She'd seen them die. No one was coming for her. And she forgot Draco Malfoy. Now we are on part 3, aka chapter 64 of Manacled by SENLINYU. Thank you so much for watching. This is the most interesting part of the story, I think, the most action-packed part. This is gonna be a hunker of a video, okay? I think I filmed like 2.5 hours worth. Had to edit it down and all that. But please let me know your thoughts of this video. Stay tuned for part 3. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so tired. It's 1 a.m. I need to sleep. I've been working all day. It's crazy how much, like, if you watched my part 1, how much of a difference seeing the flashbacks kind of recontextualizes everything from part 1. And there are a lot of things that a lot of people who read the book out of order, they'll read the flashbacks first and then get to part 1 and then part 2. And a lot of people say that it recontextualizes everything and it makes the read so much more devastating. Please let me know if you've ever read it like that. If you have read this book, let me know what you think of the story. And I'm a little delusional right now. I'm a little delulu, okay? I've been filming for so long. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Mwah!